Income tax. No one likes to pay it, but it's the source of over half of the government's revenue. It's easy to forget that America hasn't always had an income tax. In fact, for most of our nation's existence, it might have been illegal. So how did we end up with an income tax? How does it work? And what have been the consequences? Let's break it down. Some of America's oldest memories of taxes ended with the Tea Party and a revolution. So you can imagine that in the years following, taxation could be a touchy subject. After implementing the Constitution, the new government of the United States relied on tariffs for its revenue, taxes on items being brought into the country. Now, tariffs remain a divisive topic even today, but the world's economic landscape was different back then. The point is, Americans received every penny of their paychecks, and throughout the 1800s, tariffs provided enough money to fund the responsibilities of the American government. That is, until Civil War broke out. War isn't cheap, so in 1861, Abraham Lincoln led Congress to pass the first ever income tax in the United States, taxing 3% of the income of the wealthiest 3% of Americans. Turns out the plan didn't work so well, so it was revised in 1862, and again in 1864. This experiment also created the office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, who, in 1872, years after the end of the expensive war, got to watch Congress repeal the income tax it didn't need and that never really worked. Tariffs were again the name of the revenue game in the United States. But even back then, you could find a mindset still prevalent today.
All of the billionaires, you're going to start paying your fair share of taxes.
Many came to think of tariffs as primarily being a tax on the middle class, and a growing number wanted to shift that tax burden onto the super rich. How could they do that? Well, you could tax their income. So in 1894, Congress passed the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act, lowering tariff rates and offsetting the difference with a tiny income tax on only the super rich. But it never actually happened. The following year, the Supreme Court ruled that an income tax was actually unconstitutional. The reasoning coming from Article 1, Section 9, quote, "No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid, unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein, before directed to be taken." So by understanding it as a direct tax, any income tax would have to be implemented in proportion to population across the states, which wouldn't even make any sense. The Democrats did not take this decision well. In fact, they even added the policy to their party platform. For nearly 20 years, the Democrats rallied support for an income tax until finally, in 1913, they were able to ratify the 16th Amendment, which said,
"I'll allow it."
Newly elected President Woodrow Wilson then wasted no time in getting something on the books. The very same year, Congress expanded the Commissioner of Internal Revenue into the Bureau of Internal Revenue, later renamed the Internal Revenue Service, and set up a corporate income tax rate of just 1%. We won't be following that thread, but just be aware, it didn't stay that low. For individuals, your average red-blooded American wouldn't pay any income tax. Those deemed well off would pay just 1%. And if you were deemed excessively wealthy, you would pay a max of 7%. So there you have it, the evil rich people paying their fair share, while providing needed relief to everyday Americans. But before you celebrate, fast forward a whole 5 years to 1918, and it's your everyday Americans paying a 6% tax rate. And those at the top? 77%, with over 50 tax rate brackets in between. This is called a progressive tax system. Having multiple brackets is meant to provide tax relief for lower earners, but in practice, it just punishes people for success if they begin to earn more money. The rates have fluctuated a lot since then, peaking under FDR with the top tax rate of a whopping 94%. As of 2023, the top rate sits at 37%. But wait, you don't pay out anywhere near those percentages when tax season comes around. That's because filing your taxes isn't actually about paying your taxes, because the government already took your money. You see, back during World War II, the government needed money fast. So instead of waiting to collect everything annually in April, Congress introduced a withholding system, requiring employers to estimate an employee's taxes and withhold money from each and every paycheck. Then, when you file your taxes, instead of paying one massive sum, you only pay a smaller amount to adjust for the difference from the estimate. Or maybe you even get money back. Lucky you. This system works great for the government. Not only do they get their money quicker, but they also get to earn the interest on it rather than you. Plus, without having to pay one large annual sum, most citizens don't realize just how much money they've been required to hand over, because it's a lot. Besides the federal income tax, you've also got payroll tax, capital gains tax, estate tax, not to mention state sales tax. And most states have their own taxes on income, property, and the rest. Do you think you're paying enough taxes yet?
Please, sir.
I want some more.
Our tax code has seen some positive reform over the years, most notably in the 1980s and 2017, but it remains a nearly 7,000-page labyrinth in which our government can entrench corruption, and the ability to take in so much money has encouraged the government to assume more responsibilities than it really should. It's worth considering this opportunity cost of taking so much money away from citizens. Estimates vary widely, but the government wastes anywhere from tens of billions to hundreds of billions of dollars each year because they did nothing to earn it. Citizens spending their own hard-earned money tend to be more careful and can better use it to improve their own lives and the lives of others, leaving less that the government would need to do for us. So as we think about how much we should be paying in taxes, the real question is, just how big of a government do we need to be funding?